Do you know what a lie feels like? Not a spoken lie. Anyone can hear a bad story, the hesitation, the detail that is too specific or not specific enough. The way a person's eyes move when the account they are giving is being assembled rather than remembered. Those are the tells of a spoken lie. They are real and they are learnable, and most people, if they pay attention, can feel them. This is not about that. This is about the lie that a body tells. The specific wrongness, and it is a specific wrongness. It has a texture and a quality that is different from any other kind of wrong, of a wound that does not match its explanation, of an injury whose pattern says one thing and whose story says another, of the gap between the force that made the mark and the cause the person is claiming made it. Most people cannot read this. It is not a common skill. It is the skill of forensic pathologists and medical examiners, and the specific category of person who has spent years looking at bodies and learning the language that bodies speak when the person inside them is not speaking truthfully. It is a skill built on thousands of cases and a deep, systematic understanding of how human tissue responds to different kinds of impact, the direction and force and surface area and duration of contact that produce specific patterns of bruising, laceration, and damage. It is not intuition. It is reading. And when you know how to read it, when you have spent 6 years learning the grammar of it in a medical examiner's office and 11 more years carrying that grammar with you into hospital rooms where the living version of those cases walks in and lies down in a bed and tells you a story, you cannot unknow it. You cannot turn it off. You cannot look at a wound and not read it, the way you cannot look at a word and not understand it once you know the language it is written in. The night nurse on the observation ward at St. Clair Regional Hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee knows this language. Her name is Claudia Marsh. At 2:31 a.m. on a Wednesday in February, she walks into bed 11 with a chart in her hand and a question she has already half answered before she reaches the bedside. The question is, what actually happened to the man lying in this bed? The answer takes her 47 minutes to fully assemble. What she does with the answer takes the rest of the night. Before this story breaks your heart and rebuilds it again, please subscribe to this channel, ring that bell, and drop a comment below telling me which town or city you're listening from tonight. I read every single one. The man in bed 11 says his name is Raymond Cole. He is 63 years old, according to the intake form, though there is something about the way he holds his face, the specific compression of someone who has been managing pain for longer than 2 hours, whose muscles have settled into the fatigue of it. That makes Claudia think the pain started earlier than he said. He is heavyset but not soft, the build of someone who has worked physically for most of his life, and whose body remembers it even now. Gray hair, close cut, hands that have done things with them. He is awake. This is the first thing she notices that is slightly wrong. Not wrong in an alarming way. Plenty of people admitted to observation wards at 2 in the morning are awake, are too uncomfortable or too anxious or too aware of their surroundings to sleep. But there is a specific quality to Raymond Cole's wakefulness that is not discomfort and is not anxiety. It is vigilance. It is the wakefulness of a person who is monitoring their environment rather than resting in it. She notes this. She says, "Mr. Cole, I'm Claudia. I'll be your nurse tonight. I'm going to go through a few things with you, check your vitals, ask you some questions about the pain, make sure you're comfortable. Is that all right?" He says. It's not yes and thank you, not yes of course. Just yes, the word of a man who is conserving something. She starts with the vitals. Blood pressure slightly elevated, not critically, not alarmingly, but elevated in the way it is elevated in someone who is under stress that is not entirely physical. Heart rate consistent with pain. Oxygen saturation fine. Temperature normal. She moves to the pain assessment. On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put the pain right now? He says 6. She looks at him. A 6 is specific, not about a 6 or maybe a 6 or 7, a 6. She has been doing this for 11 years, and a specific number like 6, given without hesitation by a man who has been managing the pain for longer than he admitted. means one of two things. Either he is extremely precise about his own pain experience, or he has chosen the number that sounds credible without being high enough to prompt a more detailed investigation. She notes this. "Can you tell me again what happened?" she says. "I know you already told the intake nurse. I just want to hear it in your own words." He tells her. He fell down the stairs at his house. He lives alone. He was going down to the kitchen around midnight, and he missed the second to last step. Not the bottom step. He is specific about this, the second to last. And he went down on his left side. The pain in his ribs started immediately. He waited to see if it would settle, and when it didn't, around 2, he called a taxi. She listens to the whole thing. Then she says, "May I look at your left side?" He lifts the hospital gown. The left side has two things. A deep bruise over the lower ribs, extending from approximately the 7th to the 9th, and a secondary bruise on the left flank, slightly lower. The rib bruise is consistent with a fall. The distribution, the location, the way the force has crossed the surface of the skin is what you get when a body lands on its left side on a hard surface. She looks at it. She palpates carefully, and he controls his reaction well, but not perfectly. The pain is real. She moves to his left forearm. Here is where the story breaks. The bruise on his forearm is on the dorsal surface, the back of the arm, from just below the elbow to approximately midway down. It is 4 inches long, roughly uniform in width. The edges slightly irregular, but the overall shape elongated and linear. The color is the deep purple red of a bruise that is between 2 and 5 hours old. Claudia looks at this bruise for 4 seconds. 4 seconds is a very long time to look at a bruise without touching it. She has seen this bruise before. Not this specific bruise, hundreds of variations of this specific bruise, over 6 years in Nashville, in case files and on tables, and in photographs taken under fluorescent light in a room that smelled of cold and antiseptic. She has seen this bruise in the specific context that produces it, which is not stairs. This bruise is a defensive wound. It is the bruise you get when you raise your arm to protect your face, and something hard comes down on the back of the forearm instead. The pattern is the pattern of a person who saw something coming and tried to stop it with their body. She finishes the examination. She lowers the gown. She says, "The physician will be in to see you shortly." "Is there anything you need right now? Pain medication, water, anything?" He says, "I'm fine." She says, "Okay." She picks up the chart. She starts writing. He watches her write. She can feel him watching. In the margin of the intake assessment, below the clinical notes, she writes 4 words. Injury pattern inconsistent with reported mechanism. She clicks the pen. She looks at him once more. "I'll be back in a little while," she says. She leaves the room. In the corridor, she stands for 1 moment with the chart against her chest and looks at the observation ward, the amber light, the quiet beds, the monitors keeping their steady arithmetic. A completely ordinary night. A completely ordinary ward. Her hands know differently. Part 2. The Forensic Life. Before Bed 11, before St. Clair Regional, before Knoxville, before the scrubs and the stethoscope and the specific geography of an observation ward that she now knows better than she knows any other place, Claudia Marsh was a forensic case analyst at the Davidson County Medical Examiner's office in Nashville, Tennessee. She was 28 when she started. She had a degree in biology and a certificate in forensic science, and the specific quality of attention that the job required, the ability to look at something that was once a person and to see, rather than feel, what had happened to it. Not the absence of feeling, the discipline of feeling, the capacity to hold the emotional reality of what you are looking at in one part of yourself, while the analytic part works unobstructed. This is harder than it sounds. Most people who go into forensic work, because it sounds like a television program, discover, in their first year, that it does not sound like a television program from the inside. The inside is paperwork and protocols, and the slow, methodical work of documentation, and underneath all of that is the specific and non-negotiable weight of the actual thing. The body on the table, the case file, the photographs, the report that will go into a system that is used by prosecutors and defense attorneys and insurance companies and families who need to know what happened to someone they loved. Claudia stayed for 6 years. She left because she wanted to be on the other side of the timeline. A medical examiner's office sees the end. The damage is done, the cause is established, the documentation is complete. She wanted to be in the part of the story where the damage was happening and a different outcome was still possible. She went back to school. She got her nursing degree. She came to Knoxville because Knoxville was where the offer was, and she took the night shift on the observation ward, because night shifts are where the real nursing lives, and she has been here for 11 years. She has used the forensic knowledge 4 times. Once, a teenager presenting with a wrist fracture from what the parents described as a trampoline accident. The fracture pattern was not a trampoline fracture. She reported it. The investigation that followed confirmed what she had seen. The teenager is in her 30s now, presumably, somewhere. Claudia does not know. Once, an elderly man with rib injuries described as a fall in a parking lot. The parking lot fall was a possible mechanism. The distribution of the injuries was also consistent with something else. She flagged it. The follow-up was inconclusive, which is a result she has made her peace with. You report what you see. What happens after is not jurisdiction. Once, a woman in her 40s, admitted for what appeared to be a drug interaction, whose arms had marks on them that were not a drug interaction. She reported it. The outcome of that one she does know, because the woman came back 3 months later to say thank you in the specific way that people say thank you when the word is carrying more than it can hold. And once, a man in his 50s who was, by his own account, in a bar fight, and whose injuries Claudia could see were from a bar fight, and whose story was therefore true, and she noted it as consistent and moved on, because this is also part of the skill, knowing when the story matches. Raymond Cole's story does not match. She is back at the nurse's station now, his chart in front of her, the ward quiet around her. The on-call physician is in bed 11. She can see the light on under the door. She is waiting. She is also thinking. She is thinking about the forearm, about the specific dimensions of the bruise, and what they tell her about the implement. Because that is the right word, implement, the word she used for 6 years, before she used words like cause of injury, that produced it. The bruise is consistent with a rigid, cylindrical surface, approximately 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter, a rod, a pipe, a button, something that was swung rather than thrown, held by someone who was standing over the arm when contact was made. She is thinking about the timing. The color of the bruise puts it at 2 to 5 hours old, which is consistent with his account of the time, the compression of his facial muscles. The specific fatigue of someone managing pain for longer than he said is not consistent with midnight. The pain started earlier. He was hurt earlier than midnight. He waited somewhere before he came to the hospital. She is thinking about why. Part 3. The physician and the question. The on-call physician tonight is Dr. Asha Mehta. She is 37, 4 years out of residency, one of the best diagnosticians on the night rotation. She comes out of bed 11 at 3:12 a.m. with the chart in her hand and finds Claudia at the station. Left side presentation, probably fractured ribs, Dr. Mehta says. I've ordered imaging. Pain management protocol. He's not in cardiac distress, not respiratory. We'll see what the imaging shows. Did he tell you how it happened? Claudia says. Dr. Mehta looks at her. She knows Claudia well enough to know that when Claudia asks a question, the question is never just the question. Stares, Dr. Mehta says. Claudia says, look at the forearm, the dorsal surface mid-forearm. A pause, defensive, Dr. Mehta says. Consistent with it. Implement, rigid, cylindrical, probably under 2 inches diameter. Pattern isn't contact from a surface, it's directional. Downward arc, someone standing above him. Dr. Mehta absorbs this in the quiet way that good physicians absorb information they did not expect. She does not ask Claudia how she knows this. She has worked with Claudia for 4 years, and she has learned that when Claudia sees something, it is worth seeing. I'll note it in the chart, Dr. Mehta says, and I'll mention it when I go back in. Don't mention it yet, Claudia says. Dr. Mehta stops. If he's afraid of something, Claudia says, and I think he is, and I think it's not over. Confronting him with what we know right now will close him down. He'll lawyer up, or he'll insist everything is fine, or he'll discharge himself AMA, and then he's out of the building and we have no idea what he's walking back into. Dr. Mehta looks at her for a long moment. What are you planning to do? She says. I'm going to go back in there, Claudia says, and I'm going to ask him one question. She gives Dr. Mehta 20 minutes. She uses those 20 minutes to do her rounds. The other 12 patients on the ward, each one checked, each one documented. She does this completely, giving each of them the full attention of a night nurse doing what a night nurse does. The work is the work. The situation in bed 11 is one layer. The ward is another. Both layers are real. Both require her full presence, and she gives them both exactly that. She checks on Mrs. Ellertson in bed 4, who is 78 and recovering from a hip replacement, and who wakes at 3 a.m. every night, as she apparently has for the last 30 years, because her body has never agreed to sleep past that hour. They have a conversation about Mrs. Ellertson's late husband, who was a night owl by her account, and the specific frustration of being married to someone who operates on a completely different circadian schedule. Claudia listens. This is part of the job, not the medical part, the human part. The part that the job is actually for. She checks bed 7, a 40-year-old man post-appendectomy, sleeping deeply and well, all vitals exactly where they should be. She adjusts nothing. She documents and moves on. She does 10 more rooms the same way. At 2:58 a.m., she goes back to bed 11. He is still awake. She pulls the chair to the bedside and sits in it, which is not the typical posture of a nurse doing a check. The chair means this is a conversation, not a procedure. He notices. The monitor above his bed keeps its rhythm. The ward is quiet. She says, I'm not going to ask you to tell me what really happened. I know it wasn't the stairs, and you know I know. But what you tell the physician and what goes in the chart, that's your decision, and I'm not going to push you on it tonight. A pause. She wants what she says next to land without preamble. I need you to answer one question. Not for the chart, for me. He is looking at her. She says, is whoever did this going to come here? The silence that follows this question lasts 12 seconds. She counts them. Not because she is impatient, because in 12 seconds a person either decides to trust you or decides not to, and the 12 seconds themselves are information. A person with nothing to tell does not need 12 seconds. He says, I don't know. She says, that means yes. He does not contradict her. Part 4. Raymond Cole. His name is not Raymond Cole. That is the first thing he tells her, and she receives it without surprise, because she has been doing this long enough to know that a man who gives a false name at hospital intake at 2 in the morning is not doing it for small reasons. His real name is Walter Greer. He is 61, not 63, 2 years younger than the intake form. He has lived in Knoxville for 14 months, having moved from Chattanooga after an extended period in his life that he describes carefully as complicated. He worked for 30 years in logistics, supply chain management, warehouse operations, the specific and unglamorous work of making sure things arrive where they are supposed to arrive when they are supposed to arrive. The complication began 18 months ago. He witnessed something. Not in the dramatic sense, not a crime in progress, not a body in an alley. He witnessed a discrepancy in a manifest, a shipment that was documented as one thing and was physically another thing. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time in the specific, mundane, entirely non-cinematic way that people end up in possession of information they were never meant to have. He was doing his job, carefully, the way he had always done it, and the information was there. He reported it. Internally first, because internal reporting is the correct procedure, and because he was a man who believed in correct procedures. The internal reporting produced a response that he describes, carefully, as not what he expected. He reported it externally. This produced, over the following 4 months, a series of events that eventually resulted in him moving to Knoxville under a different name, living in a 2-bedroom apartment near the university, working part-time at a hardware store, waiting. He does not use the word witness protection. He uses the phrase an arrangement. The arrangement has not been working as well as he was told it would. The arrangement has, as of tonight, deteriorated to the point where someone came to his apartment at approximately 9 p.m., and he ran, not successfully, not entirely, but enough. He ran and came here because a hospital is a public place, because a hospital has security, because a man alone in an apartment at 9 in the morning with broken ribs is a man in a worse situation than a man in a hospital bed at 2 in the morning with his name wrong on the intake form. He tells her all of this in approximately 12 minutes. Claudia listens to all of it. When he finishes, she asks 2 questions. The first, does the arrangement have a contact, someone who is supposed to be reachable? He says, yes. I haven't been able to reach them tonight. The second, is there anyone, a family member, anyone, who knows where you are? He says. She nods. She stands up. She says, okay, here is what is going to happen. You are not going to be in bed 11 when whoever comes through those doors arrives. You are going to be in a room that cannot be found by someone who asks at the desk for the name you gave at intake. The imaging is going to proceed as scheduled. You need that imaging. Your ribs are the least of your problems right now, but they are still your ribs, and I need to know what we are dealing with. And I am going to make 3 phone calls in the next 30 minutes, in a specific order, and by the time I have made all 3 of them, this ward will be safer than it is right now. He looks at her. He says, who are you? She says, tonight I'm your night nurse. That's enough. She goes to the door. She stops. Without turning back, she says, there's a crossword magazine in the cabinet next to the bed. The charge nurse left it. You should read it. It'll be a while. Then she is in the corridor and the door is closed, and she is already running the sequence. Part 5. The 4 Cowls. The supply corridor off the observation ward is a narrow, fluorescent-lit space running behind the nursing station. It contains the medication dispensing cabinet, the supply shelving, the equipment storage for the ward's portable devices, and a single chair that has been there as long as anyone can remember, and that everyone uses and nobody has ever claimed. Claudia sits in the chair. She takes her personal phone from her scrub pocket. The first call is to the charge nurse. The charge nurse tonight is a man named Ellis Boone, 22 years at St. Clair, the kind of charge nurse who has been through everything the night shift can produce and who has developed, as a consequence, the specific quality of equanimity that only prolonged exposure to extreme situations produces. She tells him what she needs: a bed transfer, quiet, no update to the board until she says, imaging to follow the patient to the new room rather than the patient going to imaging. He asks no questions. He says he will make it happen in the next 15 minutes. This is the thing she has always valued most about Ellis Boone. He trusts the night nurses. He trusts them because he was one for 12 years, and he knows what they see. The second call is to hospital security. She speaks to the overnight supervisor, a woman named Patricia Walsh, and she gives her the specific information. A patient on the observation ward may have a visitor arriving in the next several hours who is not a family member, and who should not be given access to any patient information, including whether a specific name is in the hospital. Patricia Walsh has been in security at St. Clair for 9 years, and she too asks no unnecessary questions. She says she will position additional coverage at the main entrance and the admissions desk, and she will personally review the footage from the parking access cameras on the hour. The third call is the one that takes the longest to decide. She has a number in her phone from 6 years ago. She has not dialed it in 4 years. It belongs to a woman named Renata Owaz. When Claudia knew her in Nashville, a senior investigator at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Claudia does not know what Renata is now. 4 years is a long time. Titles and positions change. But she knows that Renata Okafor was 6 years ago. Exactly the kind of person who needed to know about an arrangement that had failed to protect the person it was supposed to protect. She dials the number. It rings 4 times. A voice answers that is slightly rougher with sleep than it was 4 years ago, but is unmistakably the same voice. Claudia says, "Renata, it's Claudia Marsh. I have a situation." The call lasts 9 minutes. At the end of it, Renata says, "Keep him in the building. Keep him off the board. I'll have someone there by 6. Claudia says, "That might not be early enough." Renata says, "It will be. Trust me." Claudia sits with this for 3 seconds. Then she says, "Okay." The 4th call is to the Knoxville Police Department non-emergency line. This call is the most carefully worded. She gives the specific information that is relevant: a potential threat to a hospital patient, possible arrival at St. Clair Regional, no specific time frame, and she requests a plainclothes presence in the lobby. She gives her name and her direct line at the ward. The dispatcher takes the information and reads it back and tells her she will convey the request to the duty supervisor. Claudia says thank you. She hangs up. She sits in the supply corridor chair for 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. She is not a person who gives herself long rests in the middle of things. 30 seconds to let the sequence settle, to review it, to identify anything she has missed. She identifies nothing she has missed. She stands up. She puts the phone back in her pocket. She goes back to the ward. Part 6. The ward at 4 a.m. The next 2 hours are the most ordinary 2 hours of the night. This is not accidental. Claudia has constructed the ordinariness the way she constructed everything else tonight, deliberately, specifically, with a clear understanding of what it is for. A ward that looks normal is a ward that does not signal to anyone monitoring it. From the lobby, from the entrance, from anywhere that a person with bad intentions might be watching, that anything unusual is happening on the 3rd floor. She does her 4 a.m. rounds. Walter Greer, the man who was Raymond Cole, who is now in room 318 under a notation that rids patient privacy flag, no information to be provided to non-authorized persons, is awake reading the crossword magazine, his ribs dressed, and his pain medicated to a manageable level. He looks up when she enters. She checks his vitals, reviews his imaging results, which have arrived and which confirm 2 fractured ribs, both clean fractures, no displacement. She tells him this. He nods. She notes that he has completed approximately half the crossword. She checks the other 13 patients. Room 312. A woman in her 50s, post-abdominal surgery, sleeping well, all vitals normal. Room 315. A teenage boy, 17, appendix, the 2nd appendectomy of the week, which is one of those statistical improbabilities that seems to cluster. Also sleeping, his phone on the bedside table, the screen dark. Room 306, Mrs. Ellertson, predictably awake, but reading now rather than wanting to talk. She raises a hand when Claudia looks in. Claudia raises a hand back. This is their 4 a.m. agreement, and it is entirely satisfactory to both of them. The ward is, to any observer, a normal night ward in the deep hours. The amber light, the monitors, the specific hush of a place where people are either sleeping or trying to, where the work of the night staff is to maintain the conditions in which recovery can happen. At 4:19 a.m., Claudia is at the nurse's station updating charts when her phone vibrates. A text from Patricia Walsh in security. Lobby camera male, 50s, approached the desk, asked for Raymond Cole. Desk told him no patient by that name. He is still in the lobby. Claudia reads the text. She types back, 2 plainclothes officers in lobby, correct. Walsh types back, confirmed. Since 4:02, Claudia sets the phone down. She picks up her pen. She continues updating the chart. At 4:41 a.m., her phone vibrates again. The text from Walsh reads, "Lobby situation resolved. Police have an individual. All clear." Claudia reads the text twice. She puts the phone in her scrub pocket. She finishes the chart. She picks up the next one. She works through the rest of the documentation with the same completeness and the same precision as always, the same systematic attention to the actual state of each patient, the same handwriting that the day shift will be able to read without having to decipher. Because a chart that cannot be read is a chart that is not doing its job. At 5:48 a.m., her personal phone rings. The number is Renata Okafor's. She takes the call in the supply corridor. Renata says, "The arrangement was compromised at the source. We've known for about 6 weeks, but we didn't know where Walter was." "You found him before we did," Claudia says. "He found himself. I just noticed the forearm." A pause. Then Renata says, "The person in the lobby is going to have a very long day, and Walter Greer is going to be transferred to a different arrangement by end of business." "You'll have him until about 9 a.m., Claudia says. "His ribs are fractured. He shouldn't be moved until the pain is managed. I'll make sure they know that," Renata says. A pause. "Good work, Claudia." Claudia says, "I was just doing the rounds." She hangs up. She goes back to the ward. Part 7, Morning. The shift ends at 7 a.m. She gives handover to the day nurse, a man named Jerome who has been at St. Clair for 6 years, and who is one of the most thorough day shift nurses she has ever worked with. She gives him the full picture on every patient. She gives him Walter Greer's information with the specific detail that a TBI representative will be arriving before 9 a.m. for a transfer, that the privacy flag should remain on the room until then, and that his pain management should continue on the current schedule. She gives him all of this in the flat professional tone of a handover that is complete and well documented and expects nothing more than accurate continuation. Jerome takes notes. He does not ask unusual questions. He has been given unusual handovers by Claudia Marsh before, and he has learned that the unusual parts are always the parts that matter most, and that they are always exactly as documented. She goes to the locker room. She sits on the bench. She does not immediately change out of her scrubs or get her things or begin the process of becoming a person who is leaving rather than a person who is at work. She sits on the bench for 3 minutes. 3 minutes is not a long time. It is the right amount of time for this particular morning. She thinks about Walter Greer in room 318, doing his crossword, his ribs fractured, and his pain managed, and his situation, for the first time in 14 months, in the hands of people who are in a position to actually address it. She does not know what happens to him after 9 a.m. She does not need to know. Her part of his story is the part that happened on the observation ward at St. Clair Regional between 2:31 a.m. and 7 a.m. and on a Wednesday in February, and in that part the outcome is the right outcome. She thinks about the forearm, the bruise, the 4 seconds she stood looking at it. She thinks about what would have happened if she had read it the way a nurse who had not worked in a medical examiner's office for 6 years would have read it, as a fall-related injury, incidental, noted and filed and nothing more. The man would have been discharged in the morning with pain management instructions and a referral for follow-up imaging. He would have gone back to the apartment near the university, and the person in the lobby at 4:41 a.m. would have found a different way to find him. She does not dwell on this. The outcome of a decision is not the decision. She has known this since Nashville. What matters is the reading. The accuracy of the reading, the honesty of the reading, the willingness to follow what the reading says, even when what it says is inconvenient or complicated or outside the scope of what a night nurse is technically supposed to be managing. She changed scrubs. She picks up her bag. She takes her coat from the locker. She drove today. February in Knoxville is cold. She always brings a coat. She puts it on. She goes to the door of the locker room. She stops. She goes back to her locker. She opens it. She looks at the shelf, her things, the usual things, the small contents of a work life. At the back, a card. A business card, slightly bent, the printing faded. Renata Okafor's card from 6 years ago. She has kept it, not because she expected to need it, but because she is the kind of person who keeps the things that might matter. She puts the card in her coat pocket. She goes to the door. She pushes it open. Outside, the Smoky Mountains are doing what they do in the early light of a February morning, going from dark to lit in the specific slow sequence of a mountain range catching the sun, the peaks first, then the ridges, then the valleys filling with light while the hospital parking lot is still in the shadow of the building. It is cold. The air is the specific cold of a Tennessee February that has the winter still fully in it, that has not yet begun to think about spring. She breathes it in. She walks to her car. Part 8. What the body knew. 6 weeks later, a prosecutor from the Eastern District of Tennessee calls the observation ward at St. Clair Regional and asks to speak with the nurse who admitted Walter Greer on the night of February 19th. Claudia takes the call at the nurse's station, between patients. The prosecutor's name is Castellano. He is professional and precise, and he tells her, after confirming her identity, that the case involving the individual apprehended in the lobby of St. Clair Regional on the night in question has been substantially strengthened by the documentation in the patient chart from that night. The notation about the injury pattern inconsistent with the reported mechanism has been entered into evidence. It established, in documentation made at 2:43 a.m., before the patient disclosed his real situation, before any investigation had begun, that the physical evidence of what happened to him was inconsistent with an accident. He says, "I understand you have a background in forensic case analysis." She says, "I did, for 6 years. Before nursing." He says, "The defense is going to argue that the notation was made after the fact. I need to understand the timeline." She says, "The chart is time-stamped. The notation was made at 2:43 a.m. The patient did not disclose his real situation to me until 3:07 a.m. The notation was made 24 minutes before he said anything." A pause. Castellano says, "That's what the timestamp shows. I wanted to confirm it from you directly. It's accurate," she says. He says, "One more question. The forearm bruise, your assessment of it as a defensive wound rather than a fall injury. How confident are you in that reading?" She says, "The bruise was on the dorsal surface of the mid-forearm, 4 inches in length, consistent with a rigid cylindrical implement, directional impact from above. It is not consistent with contact from a stair surface. I have seen that pattern, in various forms, over 100 times. Pause. Thank you, Marsh. Marsh," he says, "we may need you to provide a formal statement." "That's fine," she says. "I have patience. Is there anything else right now?" He says there is not. She thanks him and hangs up and looks at the ward for a moment. The amber morning light, the day shift, the noise of the hospital at 9 a.m. that is so different from the night, all the sounds of a place that is fully operational and fully awake. Then she picks up the next chart. She goes to the next patient. She knocks on the door. She goes in. She is the night nurse. This is what that means, not the nighttime. She is here in the morning too, when she has to be. Not the shift a container, not the thing. The thing is the reading. The willingness to look at what is in front of her and understand it fully, to follow the understanding wherever it goes, to be the person in the room who notices the detail that was not supposed to be noticed, who asks the question that was not supposed to be asked, who sits in a chair at a bedside at 3 in the morning and says, "I'm not going to ask you what really happened. I need you to answer one question." The body knows things. Claudia Marsh knows how to listen. That is the whole of it. That is the entire story. A woman, a ward, a bruise on a forearm, and the 12 years and one specific skill set that turned a routine admission at 2 in the morning into the one thing it needed to be. The right person, in the right room, looking at the right detail, at the right moment. If you love this type of intense nurse-taking action tales, hit that like button. Share the video with your fellow thrill seekers, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a new story.